All right, welcome to another episode of the Chief Executive Aviator. This is a different episode format we're going to give a go here, and I've got my great friend Preston Holland from Prestige Finance and also the private jet guy on Twitter, as most people know him, or X, I should say now. Preston, great to have you here. We're going to talk a little bit of different stuff today, and we're titling this kind of episode format as Cruise Phase, because when you're in cruise phase, you kind of just talk crap for a whole lot of time while you're sitting there doing not a whole lot. But we're just going to talk about flights we've taken, what's happening in the market, new tech, new aircraft. We'll do a deep dive on an aircraft deal of the week and just basically ramble about planes.
No, I'm stoked. Hey, I got a question for you before we start. What is your specific cruise phase? Are you a Bluetooth headset guy? Are you a Sirius XM guy? Like, what I found is everybody kind of has their own cruise phase thing, right? And it's rarely the same across the board. Some guys, the reason Trade Plane was such a popular rag was because it was the thing to do in cruise phase. So like, what's your go-to?
What's my go-to? I love, a lot of people are really into music and stuff like that. I don't mind listening to music, and I do have XM in the plane, and often I'll have a podcast or something like that. But lately, I just like the peace. If I'm sitting cruising for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, it's my time to be alone with my thoughts. And, I'm still keeping an eye on the plane, so it's not you're completely kind of tuned out. But, I just recently did a trip down to Austin, and it's like an hour and a half of kind of cruise, and Dallas being Dallas, I had to go around the Bravo because they were too busy. It was, it's just me thinking about life stuff, things, business things that I've got going on and that sort of thing. It's just kind of an opportunity to like organize my thoughts. And my phone doesn't work because usually I'm kind of like cruising 10,000 or whatever, and I don't have Starlink in my plane like other people. And just means that I'm like stuck thinking of, to myself. And sometimes that's a good thing.
It's funny, like there's not very many moments of complete and pure silence and thoughts, right? And it's like, that's one of them where it's like, no one can get a hold of me. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm focused, right here on what I'm doing. So hopefully this podcast can fill the 45-minute jaunts that some folks are doing in cruise phase. So if you're in cruise phase listening to this, thanks for welcoming us in. And I hope that we are slightly more entertaining than your thoughts that just go wandering.
Exactly. I love that. And this is the type of conversation that I would have when I'm flying with one of my other pilot buddies on a 2-hour trip or whatever. And we're just shooting the shit on planes and what's happening in the industry and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully it'll be just like one of those. And if you're flying solo, it'll be like having two guys to chat to about geeking out in planes.
Yeah, exactly. So where should we start? Been a lot of stuff happening over the last 28 days or however long. I don't know. It feels like it's been 2 months of the Trump presidency, and it's also been like 10 years, right? Is kind of what it feels like. So today is March 12th. So if anything that we talk about on this podcast is outdated tomorrow, I'm sorry.
Yeah, tariff talk, 100% bonus depreciation on the table currently. Seems like it's going to happen, but who knows?
Let's talk about the 100% bonus depreciation thing, because this is a really popular topic of conversation, especially like in the transaction world. Like once you own your plane, it's not as big of a deal, but it's when you're trading, right? And I work day in and day out in the trading floor, if you will. I got wind from a couple of clients last year that it was actually supposed to come back last year. Essentially, the Democrats had passed it. They had passed it through, I believe it passed through the House and it got killed in the Senate, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, politics expert. It got through one House, didn't get through the other one because the Republicans did not want to give the Democrats a win right before the election. Uh-huh. That being said, it died on the vine. It didn't happen. We come back. Trump wins, and everybody assumes that it's going to be like the number one priority. So we go through, kind of the transition phase, and nobody's really talking about it. But I'm getting texts and things like, look, in aviation, you tend to have a lot of folks that have certain influence and relationships. I'm getting text messages that say it's a done deal. Like it's not even debatable at this point. It's a done deal. Both chambers have agreed to pass it. Trump's obviously going to support it. And then it was like radio silence for like 3 months. is pretty crazy. It's like, okay, for something that's such a done deal, like why haven't we talked about it yet?
Yeah, it's just, I guess it's, in politics, it's like one little line in an entire multitude of things that are getting discussed and traded. And whilst it's really important to us, it's not so important probably in the scheme of things for all the other trades and stuff that they're doing, particularly if they both.
Well, it is. See, it is. And that's the thing that I think, airplane people, like if you're I've got a client who's in like heavy equipment rentals.
Yeah.
And like it's huge for his business because now instead of like trying to match his amortization and depreciation together, like he'll depreciate the whole thing in the first year and then 3 years later step up.
Yeah, and I mean it's certainly here in Tulsa where I'm from, manufacturing is huge and there's an enormous investment going in now, particularly in aerospace manufacturing and stuff because it's just booming here. And a lot of the guys there are in a similar boat. It's kind of like this sort of limbo land. I'd imagine there's a lot of pressure going behind the scenes from the people that were giving you the inside run. I'm guessing that there's a lot of pressure to get it sorted and get it passed. But it must still be like a bit of a bargaining chip. And I mean, if you had to explain it to the layman, what's bonus depreciation? Because I still run into people when I'm talking to them about buying a new plane that have no idea about it. And I'm saying like, well, hey, this is probably coming down the pike. And they're like, hang on, bonus depreciation, how does that work? And I'm like, this is probably like the mechanism for you to make this purchase very economical.
Yeah. Back up really quick for those that don't know what depreciation is, right? You've got kind of the tax book value in which you write down the expense over a period of time, right? So if the useful life of this coffee mug, let's say, was 3 years and I bought it for $36, if you did straight line, I would expense $12 in the first year, $12 in the second year, and $12 in the third year. At the end of its useful life, it's worth $0, and then I have accounted for that in my tax return. A couple different ways that you can do it. I'm not a tax expert. Like I look at tax returns all day, but like for the other reason, I always say like call an expert. I've got 4 or 5 people that are really good at this to like make sure that you don't, cause like there is ways that you can like raise weird red flags and like if there's not an operating business, like it's, or you don't fly 51% for actual work and that's a gray question, like set it up right. But in theory, right, if you're going to use your plane to like go do work and execute work, you can cost the reduction in value over a period of time. And look, the other thing that like I think people like there's like huge misconception. I was having dinner with a guy named Daniel Chung. He owns Aviation Tax Consultants last week, and he was like, "Look, 100% doesn't work for everybody. Like it actually sometimes makes more sense to take a straight line like Mark's depreciation." So I don't know. Bonus depreciation lets you take, so instead of depreciating my $36 coffee cup over 3 years, I can say in the first year that I buy the coffee cup, I can take all $36 as an expense in the first year. Now I can't take it in the second or third year, but I'm pulling forward that cost basis into the first year. That is like the most rudimentary way to describe it. And it's far more complicated than that, but that's kind of, if I was explaining it to my wife, that's how I'd explain it.
Again, this is not tax advice. Get proper tax advice, but for an aircraft buyer, it can, from a cash out perspective, if you've got a lot of a big tax burden in the business, it can help reduce that tax burden in the immediate sense. And typically, if you're financing the aircraft, it can almost work out to be what a typical down payment would be, is sort of the tax break you get. So if you're having to send the cash out anyway, it helps to buy a plane. It shouldn't be the reason you buy a plane. I've definitely had a few people also say that to me. I'm like, I don't think this is like the tax strategy for you, because the thing will actually depreciate and you have to spend a lot of money to keep it.
Well, and you have this thing called depreciation recapture, right? If you sell it too quickly and you don't buy another plane, like guess what? The IRS is going to come hit you up for that depreciation you took in the first year.
Yeah, that's quite out that I know is they didn't realize because they bought it during COVID and then they've just gone and sold it. And then all of a sudden their accountant said, well, the $1 million depreciation you took on your new Cirrus in 2021, well, we owe like a significant portion of that back now because you sold it for almost as much as you bought it. And they're having to pay that back, basically.
Which is what makes it a step up market. I mean, so look, on the finance side, this is the conversation. This is typically how this conversation goes with bonus depreciation. And the conversation like looks a little different with bonus versus non-bonus. But with bonus is I'm going to put 20% down on this airplane. Yep. And then you let the asset basically carry the value over time. Mm-hmm. Like, look, you have to pay your monthly payment, right? Like you still have to like come up with the monthly cash to like pay your monthly payments. So like be aware of that, be conscious of that. But basically the 20% piece at a 37-ish% tax bracket, which most people buying airplanes exist in, and more if you're in a state like California or something like that, you essentially like, yeah, like you said, instead of putting the cash to the tax man, I'm putting the cash towards equity in my airplane. Now, go ahead and calculate that is probably going to erode over your life, over the lifetime of you owning the asset. So like, your 20% equity is probably going to erode over time. And when it all nets all the way out, like you probably just get to use the asset on the bank's dime. That's like kind of how the math works out. It's a way better way than like paying cash and giving up, 5.5% or 12% returns. Or, if you're in venture like you, right, like 300,000% returns, right?
Ventures actually work out and don't go to zero, but that's by the by. We put a lot of bets on, so it generally means that at least some of them actually work. But so I mean, bonus depreciation is now, at least it sounds like it's going to happen, but we're sort of still in this holding pattern, and probably the market for certain types of aircraft are, that's probably reflecting it in a little bit of the case, but there's still a lot of the bull. Definitely seems very bullish, at least in higher end GA that I've seen. And I don't know if you're seeing any different.
I think we're in this like very interesting spot for probably the next 6 weeks. So this is going to be a very timely, relevant podcast. And if you listen to this in 6 weeks, probably gonna think I'm an idiot or I was right. And that's markets, right? If anybody tells you like what's going to happen in the future, like they're just guessing. Everybody's just guessing. Here's kind of my hypothesis. Bonus depreciation makes people take irrational things. But you have to marry that with a confident economy, right? Mm-hmm. There has to be confidence in the future, and you have the 100% bonus depreciation. It makes people do kind of silly things, for better or for worse, right? Like I'll leave that debate for somebody way smarter than me. But we're in this weird period of time right now where there is a rising inventory. There's more inventory than there was 2 years ago. Transaction volume was slow last year. I mean, like from like a percentage basis, it was down 8 to 10% in some markets 20% down, and just transaction volume and just like turnover of airplanes.
Typical in a election year, or particularly a contentious election year.
Yeah, and it's just the uncertainty piece. Mm-hmm. We've had 3 days of record sell-offs in the stock market. I mean, it's been a literal bloodbath, matched with bonus depreciation likely coming back this year. So everybody's thinking about taxes, but you're not going to know really what your tax burden is till the fourth quarter, which is when everybody starts buying airplanes. Yeah. So like I've been telling my clients, I'm like, look, if you're going to sit around and say, I'm going to wait for the market to continue to go down, I'm not 100% sure that is the most likely outcome. Mm-hmm. I don't think the most likely outcome is that prices continue to slide. Now, there's like 120 G6 SR22s on the market right now. G6, like we're talking G6, or maybe there's 100. Anyways, I had a broker tell me about it today, and he's like, "There are a lot on the market right now." So there's something to be said about that. But
from a technology standpoint, and that I think that buyer of that Cirrus is very affected by that. The G7 is quite a big step up from a tech perspective. The FMS that's in that plane is much more like you would get in a G3000 suite in a Citation, and that's ultimately where a lot of these guys want to end up. And it certainly is a bigger match to the Vision Jet, which is where all of them want to end up ultimately. Right. So I think that G6 market is kind of like in this weird spot, and it seems to be, at least from what I'm seeing at the moment, there's these weird little pockets where it's like oversupply of a certain type of aircraft, or even I forget who posted on X about
Greg Seidor was talking about the 550 market.
Yeah, or like where there's just a lot of 550s, and it's being driven because there's a new model kind of like pushing people to basically get rid of that, and they're moving up to a different aircraft. And it's just interesting that within this sort of like the whole market, there's these little pockets where the dynamics are actually quite different. Yeah. And it's bad luck if you're kind of stuck with one of those assets, because the G market is probably going to see, from the list prices, at least from what I'm hearing, is like there's some pretty deep discounts that are
Yeah.
happening.
Well, and the other thing is that I mean this is an interesting piece about like how fickle these markets are. 12 weeks ago, if you asked me about the Piper Mirage market, I would have told you don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. There have been like 12 Piper Mirage transactions in the last 10 days.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's on fire. It's literally like the Mirage market's on fire right now. And 12 months ago, all of my broker buddies were all like, if you got a Mirage, like see if you can hold on to it because it's not good. They're sitting for a long time.
Yeah.
And literally I've had 2 Mirage closings in the last 2 months. And then I'm friends with a lot of the big Mirage brokers and they're like, yeah, we don't have any more inventory. Like we went from having this like glut supply. Now the Mirage market's much more micro and like the Cirrus G6 market has a way broader appeal. You and I could buy one of those. I don't know if I'm not buying a Mirage right now. That's probably your next step, right? But like you're likely just going to skip the cabin class piston market and go straight into something, turboprop or something like that. But it's just like, it's weird. Like these markets like have these, all of a sudden there's just like big swing and it like, oh wow, okay. A lot of those move.
Yeah, I heard on the Malibu Guru podcast, they were talking about like even just within that whole PA46 market, there's a, set of, essentially they were Mirages and then they've been turned into jet props through convert. And
they are hilarious looking, by the way.
yeah, I mean, but still, it's a great plane. It's a little bit more complex than the standard Meridian, but the capital cost is less. They're easier to over torque and stuff like that. So there's some downsides to them. But all of a sudden, it seemed like there was a little bit of like a glut, or they were staying on the market longer, and so there were better prices. And then I just spoke to someone yesterday morning that had been trying to buy one, and he was like, "Well, like." They're just getting sold. Like good ones are getting sold out real quick.
The good ones are going off market. Actually, like they're not even getting to market. There's so many people buying them.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this is the weird thing about a very opaque market like aircraft buying is there's just these weird pockets, and then there's off market transactions, and then there's certain things that drive everything. And
well, and this is here's like a little piece of like here's just like a tool tip of advice, and feel free to like disagree with me on this. When people ask me why they should pay a broker, because a lot of people see brokers like real estate agents, right? For better or for worse, there's a lot of like pushback against residential real estate agents and like how much value that they create, right? I will leave that up for debate. I'll just say there's a couple of really funny South Park clips about that. But even in the piston and the jet brokers, like they're different classes of people. The deal is that they, for better or for worse, hold all the data, much more than any of these third-party resources. They know the selling price. And it's a momentum game. If they've done 15 PA46s in the last 12 months, they, one, know what the price should actually be based off of historical data. Two, they probably have a pool of buyers sitting by that have called on all the other 15 of theirs that they've got sitting in the wings if you're selling. Or if you're buying and you engage a buy-side broker, they're going to see these pocket listing. Like the pocket listings are far more common in airplanes than in housing.
I think there are great real estate agents, and they do exactly what you're talking about. Is like they add value because they know what's going on in the market, or like we bought our house off the market because the real estate agent personally knew the person that was moving out of the house and that sort of thing. And it's no different, particularly within subcategories like the PA46 example is a good one because there's only 4 or 5 kind of players, Casey Aviation and Cutter and stuff like that are really good at those aircraft, and they just know most of the fleet. Like those guys have seen most of those planes, and for better or worse, most of us pilots kind of like want to progress through them. So they might own a Meridian for 3 or 4 years or 5 years, and then they're moving on to a Citation, or they are moving from a Meridian into an M600 or the M700, or they're moving into a TBM, and you kind of have this like long-term relationship because there's this insatiable need to go faster and higher and more comfortable. And so, they have the finger on the pulse on the market so much better. And also, I didn't use a broker to buy my last plane per se, but I used someone that knew the type and was actually my CFI and knew the type really, really well and could help me kind of navigate the type that I was.
What you bought, I mean, there's a price threshold to using an acquisition broker. and it's around 500 grand. I mean, like if you make a mistake and you overpay by 10% at 200,000, like, yeah, it sucks to lose 20 grand. Don't get me wrong. But like overpaying by 10% at $1 million is like much pricier. And like, if you get a maintenance thing, like I've got a guy buying I'm not going to say what type of airplane because it's going to be a dead giveaway of like, but he's buying an airplane and he's working with a buy-side broker. This airplane is not ready to go. Like, and they're trying to, and the sell side is trying to push him to close before like all these squawks are resolved. Yeah. And the buy-side broker calls me and he's like, hey, what do you think? And I said, there's no way we're closing on this airplane with it. I said, on the finance side, could we with a holdback? Probably, because it is airworthy. But I'm like, yep. There's just no, like, don't do that, because what if now you own the airplane and there's a $50,000 repair? Guess what? You own it now, right? Not the seller. You don't get to walk away from it. Like, don't do that. The buyer almost was like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll let you pressure me into it because he just didn't know any better. So the buy side's like, no, we're not doing this. And it's like, that kind of stuff's super, super important.
Yeah. No, very, very true. Well, let's change gears a little bit. Have you been flying much recently? I know you've got...
I was trying to, and then the 3 weeks I've been in town and this quarter all had really crappy weather. It was like we had really crazy winds. And so I'm just going to come out to you and we'll go flying because apparently you get much better weather than I do.
It's generally been pretty good. We had a big snowstorm, which is very rare for here, that came through a few weeks ago. So that was a bit of a tough flying time. Thankfully, at that time, also, my whole family was sick with the flu, so there was no chance I was going to get out and fly anyway. So kind of like that kind of worked out all right. And it's been pretty cold, but it's generally been pretty good. The wind here this time of year, it's generally windy and there's a decent amount of crosswind, so good practice for that sort of stuff. But I've just done some more local flights over to Bentonville for some business stuff and also for some pleasure. Bentonville has a great FBO, for those who don't know, at Thaden Field.
Thaden Field, baby. Yeah. My favorite FBO.
It's so good, and that's at KVBT for the other pilots out there, and they take great care of you. There's a little Fly Oz club that we're members of there, and you kind of have a place to go work or to eat up on the second level, and then they have a bunch of backcountry fields that are only open to the club as well, which is kind of fun. But so I've been doing a bit of that and trip down to Austin. And then I took the family up the other day and we had a loose ignition, which I didn't know about. And it kicked, as we got to cruise, we kind of hit a little bit of turbulence and it kicked the key back to switch one of the mags off. And so as soon as I started leaning out, the engine started running rough. When I was full rich, no issues, but started leaning out, and it's never good when you've got your family on board and you do that. So thankfully we weren't very far from the airport, so just turned back and went back in. ATC was amazing, cleared the way.
Did you squawk?
No, we didn't declare an emergency, but I was on flight following, and so it was very easy just to say, hey guys, we're getting a little bit of engine roughness, nothing bad, not declaring an emergency, but we're going to turn back to the field. We're going to maintain, we're at 5,500. We maintained 5,500 almost all the way to the field, and then sort of circled to land, and they cleared the pattern to give us the space, and it was great. And I had my kids in the back, and they were kind of worried because they didn't really know what was going on, and my wife, who's not a great flyer, also a little bit worried, but she was kind of like, you were like way too calm for that. But it was really like, it wasn't a major issue. And then
I guess checking your mags is not part of the like emergency checklist, right? I mean, that's a kind of a...
No, it's not. But the thing is, I checked as soon as we turned around, I did check the mags and the key. I made sure the key was in the right position, which it was. On a Cessna, they have a very kind of like crappy plastic, like ignition kind of key cap thing that goes over the ignition, and it was a little bit loose. And so, but just to be safe, when we got back, I had the mechanics spend a lot of time, do a compression test, bore scope it, do all that sort of stuff. We did an oil change, made sure there was no metal in the oil. What else did we do? We went through the carburetor, we did all the fuel stuff, and thankfully it was all running great. So I had them go and fly it for an hour and a half and take it through everything, because I just want to make sure it was good. It was expensive, but it was probably worth it in the long run. But that's been my most recent interesting flying experience. Learned a few things that I probably should have done differently. If I was, without my family, I probably would have troubleshooted a few things up there. But happy with the decision I made to come back and not risk it.
Yeah, it's just not worth it.
No, definitely not worth it.
I had an interesting I had an interesting aviation experience in December. So did I tell you that I'm partially red-green colorblind? Like,
Yes. And you've got
very, very partially. Yeah. So we go up, and so there's three of us kind of in my flight school that all have this deficiency. One of the guys' dads had a 206, not the turbo. It was like just a straight up. It was non-pressurized, non-turbo, just like the straight up 206. It's like there's not a lot of these sitting out there, but like that thing just low and slow, but it can haul a bunch of crap and tons of leg room.
Yeah, a lot of the oil guys use them here.
Yeah, they're sweet. Well, we're flying up there, and it was early, and it was over the mountains. You probably don't do a ton of mountain flying, but like there's a little stretch between Chattanooga and it was right outside of DC that we were. There was like it was like, all right, if we have an engine out, like that little strip right there in between those two trees is like where we're shooting, right? It's like you don't have many options. Or like, hey, see that pond down there? Like that's where we're going. So we get up there, do the lantern test. I'm the only one who passed of the three of us. It was just me who passed. Cause when I say slightly, it's like of the 10 dot pages, like the guy's like turning them. He's like, what do you see there? I told him, what do you see there? I told him, what do you see there? I said, a lot of gray dots, to be honest with you. And, he's like, yeah, you would not pass the flippy test, but I did pass the little, the light lantern test, but they outlawed it January 1st this year. So I had to do it like right before the end of the year because I knew I had to get it done to get my nighttime restriction taken off. So as a consolation, we're flying back, and one of my buddies was like, you want to fly back? And I was like, with the guy who owned the plane, you want to fly right seat? And I was like, nah, like you got it. Like I passed. So I'll give you a little consolation. You can go ahead and fly back. No. And so as we're going back, sit in the right seat. It's like every single beacon we pass by, it's like, what color is that? And like the guy up front's like, white. I don't know. And we're coming into land. Collegedale has just gotten new LED lighting, runway lighting. But it only worked for a while on like half the runway. Oh. And so like we're coming in, and I look out the window and I was like, oh, those are the tops of trees. I was like sitting in the back. I was like, I think I could probably reach out and touch those. Like we are pretty low. And we cleared it and land, and the guy who owns the plane, who bases it out of Collegedale, was like, yeah, it was a little low. He was like, not too bad, but he was like, it's a little low. And I was like, no, it's very low.
Yeah. Oosh. It's that's not a comfortable feeling. I will say, I'm assuming does it have any like a G5 in it or anything like that?
Yeah, it was mostly gas. Or it is mostly glass.
Even if I'm just on a non-instrument approach and stuff like that, I almost always use the visual approach that you can load up in the Garmin, in the G750, and just to give you an extra glide slope, particularly when it's dark or the light's not great or there's a lot of haze and stuff like that.
We had the glide slope. It was just kind of like, and then we kind of didn't, and I was like, oh, it was a little low. But it all turned out in the end. I'm glad that we weren't in anything with like more horsepower, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, because things will happen very quickly in that sort of plane. But all right, well, let's change gears and let's maybe do a quick review of an aircraft deal of the week.
Cue the deal of the week music. Also, speaking of deal of the week, I need me a hat association hat. This is my Jet Aviation hat. These are free. These are free plugs, but I'll tell you this: if there is a broker or an aviation company out there that's listening, we will take sponsorships in the form of hats, and we will wear your hats on the podcast.
Exactly. We can. Tyler sent this one to me, but we can definitely take hats and good hats too, because I have a huge head.
So do I, dude. It's like dude. I'm like, this is like a big hat, and I'm stretching it.
My wife was always like, "Are you on the last hole again on this thing? You're a stupid big melon."
Yeah, and I'm bald, so it's like a bad combo.
Yes, me too. I look like a bowling ball, but it's unfortunately just part of the everyday. But we'll cue the aircraft deal of the week music, and let's have a look at a M600 SLS. Really nice plane. Kind of surprising that there's actually a few of these up, but I'm assuming it's from what we just talked about before, that these guys are flying these for 350, 400 hours and then moving up to a TBM to go faster, or a Citation.
PC-12 or...
Yeah, PC-12, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The M600 airplane is just an interesting one, right? I've got a lot of tall friends that say just don't even try it because you'll be too tall. It competes with, it's in the same class as the TBM and as the Epic, but the interior is different and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
sold by the guys at Cutter.
really like
The,
almost can fit in there.
yeah, I'm 5'8", so like I'm good, but 5'9", but not really.
Yeah, I'm 6'2", and my knees are like right at the meridians, panel basically.
Yeah. Although I'm like long in the torso, so I'm tall in SR22s. Like my head hits I've got like ridiculously short legs. That's another topic for another time. But I'm like too tall for the SR22 like this way, but I have to scoot my seat all the way forward so my legs can meet the pedals. I'm like, what am I, child? But the Halo system is like, I mean, game changer across the board, right? And it really sells spouses. Right. I mean, it's like, I think we pilots tend to take a little bit of the fate into our own hands, right? We understand the risk, right? And so we're saying, okay, this is a risk and we're going to take it, right? Doing a solo flight type thing. But with your family on board, right? Like that's what, matters. In the Halo system, Autoland, I mean, award winning across the board and really sells. I did an interesting M600 transaction last year. The guy was like, yeah, I don't need the Halo system. Like, here's my budget. Like, and like, for those people who are wondering, like the Halo system adds a couple $100,000 worth of value, if not more. Taking two airplanes side by side, one with it, one without it, like the Halo gets, a lot more value. And he was like, oh, just kidding. My wife just watched the YouTube video on the Halo and we're up in the budget and we're going to go ahead and get the one with the Halo.
And I think the option cost is about $200,000 well, I think now most of them are going to ship with it anyway. But even my wife, who has really no interest in planes from a technical aspect, the things that she talks about are auto land, because I've shown her it in a King Air that we've flown in before. And she's like, should we buy a Cirrus with a parachute? Like, it's just interesting the things that are there. But this is, auto land is somewhat like the parachute for a PT6 powered plane, because that PT6 probably isn't going to break. I mean, I think the PC-12 is like, I think it never had a power plant failure, or the PC-12 never has had a PT6 fail in that airframe.
Yeah.
To the point.
Yeah, it's super reliable.
So that's just an example where the autoland, if the pilot's incapacitated or there's some kind of other issue, you can get it on the ground. I've talked to my wife about doing a pinch hitter course where she could at least get the plane on the ground if something happened, probably not fully intact, but at least safely enough that everyone survives. But this would definitely be like, my wife would be one of those ones going, let's just spend the extra money for it.
Yeah, exactly. No, mine too. My wife actually has told me that she's pretty sure that piston airplanes are like kind of a no-go for her.
Yeah.
She's like, so she came to Oshkosh a couple years ago and I'm like giving her the whole tour, right? I was early in my aviation journey and I get her in an SR-22 and I was like, how about this? I was like, just picture it. Like our daughter in the back with the dog, maybe your mom or your dad. And she said, no, I don't think so. And I was like, all right. So then we walk over to the Vision Jet. We get in there. She said, okay, I think this is like the entry level for me. I was like, all right, I've got some work to do.
Yeah, you got to get people selling and financing.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, Cutter in Houston, airplanes in Houston, something to think about. Or sorry, San Antonio. It's all Texas, right? Something to think about is like Florida airplanes can have corrosion. You want desert climate like holds value. And it's kind of like buying don't buy vehicles from the upper Midwest or from the Northeast because it's going to have rust. Same idea. Florida, there's a couple other states, other things, good things that brokers help you with. So even
down to like, particularly with planes with beta, what airfield do they fly in and out of? Is it a like fairly standard like Class Delta that has good runway, maintained pretty well, or are they flying out of an untowered airport where there's going to be dirt and rock and dust and stuff like that? Because as soon as you put this PT6 in beta, the dust and stuff that you can suck into that engine and just the tiniest little bit of wear on those fan blades. I mean, when you go into like a hot section overhaul or a hot section inspection, each one of those blades, I forget how much they are, but if you get one that has to be replaced, it might be like $10,000 to replace. Yeah. So those sort of things really influence the value, it seems like, and people are pretty clued into them, especially the brokers.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So cost model, I get this question a lot. What do I use for costing when I'm doing my tweet threads? And for those of you who are not on Twitter, like go get on Twitter. Twitter's so much fun. Simon and I are friends because of Twitter. So like, just to put it into perspective, this is Aviacost. You want a really fun fact about Aviacost, Simon? Do you know who created Aviacost?
No, I don't.
So his name's Chris Dewar. He is a friend of mine. He also started Aircraft Cost Calculator.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So he built ACC and then sold it to Sandhill, and then kind of saw what happened when it went to, the PE farm, if you will.
Yep.
It's not a huge knock on Sandhill, but and so he went and started Aviacost. Well, Aviacost, he's iterating on a lot of the ideas that he had in the original product and like creating some really cool, like there's some really handy tools in here. And it's still new, right? The technology is still new. Like, don't expect it to blow you away if you're a back-end developer or anything like that. But like a lot of the technology is becoming really cool. And then the other piece is I have watched the data that he puts into this thing, and like it's fresh. Like it is very fresh. So not a plug, like I don't have an affiliate code, like don't tell them that I sent you, but it's also cheaper than all the other ones too. So at least something to think about. So I loaded in 250 hours a year. It's pretty, light to medium use on an owner flown. $992 of direct variable cost.
Yeah, I was going to say it's worth reminding people that might be familiar with other PA46s is the 600 has a 600 horsepower PT6, which you get a cruise speed of like maybe 45 knots higher, I think, in normal cruise. The 700's even more, but it does change your dynamic because you're going to get there faster than you would with a normal Meridian. So you just have to kind of take that into account when you're thinking about an hourly cost. And you've done some good calculations that you posted on X before where people, similar jet, similar price, but the fact that you get there 30 minutes faster does change the calculation a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And actually I use this this is the tool that I built that entire article and tweet thread around. So I'll show you how I came to that conclusion. It's got crew expense. I just loaded kind of the default. This is like, you're obviously not paying yourself $120,000 a year, but you are going to pay 10 grand for training. That's for sure. And so like you can, like you edit for like, if you know what your, local FBO, like what's your fuel cost, right? Like this just pulls in averages, is a really good starting point, and then everything's editable. This is how I did that. This is actually how I built that article. So here's some insider baseball. Oh, and perfect. We totally have the exact scenario in which this plays out.
Yep.
So if you look here, for those that are audio only, what I did was I'm comparing a TBM 960 and the Piper M600. Now, this software does not have all the variants, so, obviously adjust your block speed based off of what the airplane you're looking at is based on. But let's just pull these two for two. The Piper M600 variable cost is $992. The TBM 960 is $1,214. So you would think, oh, like I'm going to go with the M600 because it's cheaper hourly cost, right? And so, but you're going to get there over 1,000 nautical miles. Now, if you're going 1,000 nautical miles in you've got a stronger bladder endurance than I do, but good for you.
100 as well as and if you're going 1,000 nautical miles, you're going to want to be going with the wind because you probably have to stop and refuel at some point, particularly if you're carrying 3 or 4 people because the useful load's a lot less you would have in the TBM in the 960. So, but
if you look at the speed differential times the variable cost, it's actually for the same distance, it's like $300 an hour cheaper, or $300 total over 3 hours. It's about $100 an hour cheaper to fly the TBM than the M600.
Absolutely. The difference being that the capital cost is, I think, considerably higher on the 960. But you do get a pilot's door, which is for tall and fat people like me, it's like a massive selling point to be able to go in and out of a door instead of squeeze your butt through the pilot and co-pilot kind of seats that you have in the Piper. But this is a really great tool and great example. And probably, if you're going to go and buy a $2 or $3 million plane for your business, buying a subscription for this to start to kind of like understand the differences, it's probably worth it. And certainly hiring a broker that has access to this, is worth it.
Right. Well, and I mean, you can try it for free for a couple of days and just see if it's like good for you. And then you can subscribe monthly. Like you don't need you might not buy the annual, but you don't necessarily need it. If that makes sense. So it's it's used by a lot of really solid brokers. Definitely check it out. It's a really good tool. Then if we're going to finance it, right? So I just punched in the purchase price on the M600 and said, we're not negotiating at all. We're just going to make a full price offer and send it to the wind. $730,000 down, which when you bonus depreciate 3.6, it starts to look a lot like $730,000 in cost savings.
Yep.
And so I put like super generic terms in here. You've got a couple of levers to pull on when you're thinking about financing. So like, here's like my area of expertise, and I'm about to like plug out, but if you're not using me, like this works across the board and for anybody that you finance with. So I'm just going to give you some free information. There's 3 levers that you can play with in aviation finance: is the amortization, the interest rate, and the down payment. Right. So those are really the only 3 things that you can change to change either your monthly payment or your total capital cost, or, kind of just depending on what you're trying to optimize for. Is little money down, right? And so what I've put in here is essentially a 15-year amortization at a 7% interest rate and 20% down. Those are very generic terms. As long as you are, with a pulse and you can actually afford this thing, like, and you don't own a cannabis company, or, you don't have anything weird going on. This is what, you almost guaranteed to prove at this kind of rate. Now, we could extend the amortization, and that's going to lower your monthly payment. The thing is when you lower your monthly payment, when you go to sell it, you're going to owe more on it than you do now, like than if you do a lower amortization. So it's like it's all kind of levers you can pull on.
Yeah, particularly if you're buying this value that is going to depreciate. You're not going to go back and sell it again for 3.6 million. If you sometimes when you're buying a plane where there's not a large market of them, they've kind of like depreciated as much as they're going to depreciate, and you've kind of put little bits of upgrades here and there into the panel and stuff like that. Quite often you're left with you're selling it for basically what you bought it for, but certainly not when it gets into the $1 million kind of territory.
Yep. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. So like, if we lowered our loan term, or, amortization, increase it to 240, that drops our monthly payment to 22,000. If we wanted to drop our interest rate, right, or drop our down payment, the monthly is going to go up, right? But you're going to have to come up with less. So instead of coming up with, $730,000, you're going to come up with 547. So it's like, let's pull in the levers. And like for me, when I talk to clients, like my number one thing is like, what are we trying to optimize for? Right. And then there's this third element of like, I don't want to give you, I've got 8 entities and I don't want to have to go through the absolute, craziness of getting all of those tax returns and stuff. And then you're just going to have to come with more money to the table. I'm doing a deal right now that the guy has, I don't know, couldn't tell you how many LLCs he's got, but he, like 12, he's got like 12 LLCs. It's not even real estate. Like, it's like, well, one of them's real estate, but the rest of them are whatever, but he's liquid. So like, we have a product that's 40% down. And as long as you've got liquidity to cover 18 months of all of your monthly obligations, then good to go. So,
well, that's a great example of, like a $25,000 a month payment seems like a lot. It's like buying an expensive house, that sort of thing. But you go and get a business that's, cash flowing, $300,000 a month or something like that. It starts to make it actually not that big of a chunk. Or you get a couple of partners. There's a couple of guys here on my field that are putting together a PC-12 partnership, and there's a M350 partnership that's up for grabs right now, and then there's a TBM partnership. There's actually a group of guys that are putting together an M350, a TBM, and a Cub together in like a group, and they're going to have 5 or 6 guys. It's almost going to be like a kind of pseudo flying club kind of thing, because those planes kind of cater to different missions, and I think they've got 4 guys in now, and they're going to try to get 2 more. But there's ways where you can make those kind of numbers really work, and it's not as daunting as $30,000 a month I got to put into this thing just to pay for the loan, then all the running costs kind of thing. But that was a really great example of what a deal would look like, and that plane is a great entry point from a business perspective. You'll have to have flown a lot to be the pilot of that plane to get insurance on it, and I'm sure the airplane insurance guy on Twitter will be able to weigh in here, but you're going to need 600 or 700 hours probably, and a decent amount of retract time to even get insurance on it. Or if you you can get insurance on it. Without that, you're going to have a safety pilot, or you're going to have a huge insurance bill to cover that. But there's plenty of people who've been flying for quite a while, and they'll upgrade to that aircraft, and it's a really great, regional business aircraft. Get in front of customers very easily, fly at 27,000 feet, get above most of the weather. Get there pretty quick. So that was a good one to dive into. But we've now been going for 52 minutes, rambling about planes, which has been kind of fun. We've got plenty of other things that we could talk about, and maybe in the next episode of this, we'll dive into a few different kind of developments. There's a new PT6 killer engine out by GE that's going to be on the Denali. There's the Robinson R88, which everyone keeps texting me, have they invented a helicopter without a tail boom? And we're just reminding everybody that that's just the demonstrator, the cabin demonstrator. It will have a tail boom. It will have a rotor. Even my sister, who's not a plane person, texted me that last night, and I was like, oh no, what have they done?
Poor Robinson. They just... Yeah. Sick looking bird, though.
Sick looking bird. And I know they've been working very closely with Skyrise, which is if Skyrise can make that work in the Robinson and get that sort of flight operating system into more GA aircraft, man, it's going to make things a lot easier and safer. Really amazing seeing that tech develop. But because it's aircraft tech, it'll probably take 10 years before it's widely available. But we can dive into more of that in the next episode. It's been really fun to chat on all of this with you, Preston, and I feel like I could speak for another 5 hours on all of this, but we'll save that for future episodes, and appreciate everyone listening for as long as they did.
Yeah, so we're at the top of the descent now, so you go on, go ahead and run through your checklist, and we'll see you on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Preston. Have a good one.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for flying with us today. If you're getting value from these conversations with other pilot entrepreneurs and executives, do me a really quick favor. Hit that subscribe button or the follow button, depending on what app you're using, so you'll never miss another episode. And if you've got an extra minute and you loved us, drop us a 5-star review. Those reviews help other aviation-minded business folk find us, and honestly, they really just make my day. What about you? Have you got a story about using your plane to grow your business, or maybe someone you know? Well, shoot me a message on X at Simon G. Turner or at the Chief Executive Aviator podcast, or pop me an email, simon@turneraircraft.com. See you on the next Chief Executive Aviator.